single day, like I've always done and always will.
Passing these bills on the floor, making yet another stand.
Welcome to this week's edition of New York Now. I'm Chantal Dastra. The April 1st deadline for the state budget came and went this week with little assurances on how much longer it will be for leaders to come to an agreement. State Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins told reporters negotiations were at the beginning of the middle, signaling a long road ahead before the final budget will be passed. As we've discussed here on the show, the main issues on the docket are increased taxes on wealthy New Yorkers, potential changes to the state's climate laws, protections for immigrant New Yorkers, and car insurance support. This week, Governor Kathy Hochul signed an extender, pushing the deadline to April 7th, giving leaders additional time to sort out differences. In this next segment, our Elise Klein brings us a deep dive on where things stand for one of the most prevalent issues driving negotiations: increased taxes on wealthy New Yorkers. Here's that story.
New York State lawmakers have proposed increasing taxes for high-income earners in the state. This isn't a new proposal from lawmakers each chamber has included in their one-house budget resolutions for the last several years. But whether or not this proposal makes it into the final enacted budget is one of the big questions lingering. Each year, the state allocates funding via tax revenue in the state budget for programs in areas like childcare, healthcare, education, and more. From 2024 to 2025, the state collected more than $61 billion in personal income taxes, according to the State Department of Taxation and Finance. Some state lawmakers say this proposal could generate billions of dollars more for social services in the state.
What's really unaffordable in the state is things that working people need, whether that's childcare or more affordable healthcare or housing costs. That stuff costs money to do, and the state should step forward and help provide some support there.
Raising revenue is really important for a lot of the priorities that the Democratic majority has been advocating for. And it's very difficult for us to be able to pay for all of these things without finding ways to raise revenues.
The Senate one-house budget resolution included increasing personal income tax rates from the top two earning brackets in the state by about 0.5% and 2% tax rate increase for wealthy corporations. The Assembly one-house budget resolution included a range of increases from around 0.5% to 2% for taxes on the state's top earners for New Yorkers making more than $5 million to more than $100 million a year. While many Democrats are supportive of increasing taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers and richest corporations, Governor Kathy Hochul has made it clear that she is not interested in raising taxes on wealthy New Yorkers, setting up a battle for negotiations. Meanwhile, on the other side of the aisle, many Republicans in the legislature are also against the measure.
I don't think we can tax our way out of the problems that we're seeing as a state financially. Long term, we've got out-year gaps because we have a spending problem. We don't have a revenue problem here in the state of New York.
The Democrats talk about higher taxes every year we get to the budget because they just want to spend and spend and spend. They want to spend and they want to focus it on various interest groups that they pander to get votes from. That's what it's all about. We're the highest taxed state in the nation, and they want to drive taxes up even higher.
State Senator Liz Krueger, a Democrat representing parts of Manhattan and the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, who has been in office for nearly 30 years, argues the Democrats' push for increasing taxes is a more transparent way of generating revenue compared to the way she recounts Republicans used to tackle revenue.
I remember being in the minority for 17 of the 25 years I've been here. And I watched every year as the Republicans, who never wanted to say they raised the tax, would borrow enormous amounts more than we ever had before and kept skyrocketing the amount of debt the state had that was basically just kicking the can down the road.
In 2017, the year before the Republicans lost majority control in the Senate, New York was the fifth highest indebted state in the country, according to a report from the state comptroller. The report also projected a continued increase of state debt more than the state could handle. Today, the state has about $55 billion in debt.
I'm a tax and spend Democrat. I think it's a lot better than being a borrow and spend Republican.
Some Republican leaders push back, saying it isn't a financially accurate picture to paint and Democrats spend too much.
Well, I think that's divorced from reality. The fact of the matter is we're a state. We have to have a balanced budget. the numbers speak for themselves. The budget has grown by tens of billions of dollars. I think over $81 billion since Governor Hochul's been in office. So they've just continued to increase taxes.
Raw adds the state has collected additional debt under former Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration with exemptions towards the state's debt cap.
Our debt is certainly a concern. I think if you look back even just a couple of years, we'd be over our state debt cap if not for, again, single-party Democratic control. They exempted a whole bunch of debt from our debt cap to get around that.
Other Republican leaders argue they feel the Democrats' promise of revenue from tax increases to fund issues such as childcare is a false promise.
So I think that these are convenient reasons to soften the blow, right? We're going to raise taxes in a state that already has highest taxes in the country, so we can do these really good things. Well, why aren't you just doing it now? Why aren't you doing it now? I don't believe that I know we have the money to do it, but they're not doing it. So it's a kind of a bait and switch in my view.
Or as he also has concerns, along with many other Republican lawmakers, about New Yorkers and businesses leaving the state as a result of increased taxes. Some Republicans say they are particularly concerned with Wall Street business.
We're the financial capital of the world, and we're losing ground on that. Texas is opening a stock exchange in just a month or two. These jobs are going to Florida, they're going to Tennessee, lower tax states. Driving up the taxes is only going to encourage more people to leave New York State.
Many Democrats push back on this argument from Republicans. Some Democrats say there is no data on outmigration of wealthy New Yorkers and businesses because of tax increases. This year's budget cycle has an additional push locally from newly elected New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Earlier this year, Mayor Mamdani called on Albany to increase taxes on income earners of over $1 million by 2% and raise corporate taxes on the most profitable corporations, saying there are two paths to solve New York City's fiscal crisis, budget gaps, and improve affordability.
There are two paths to bridge this gap. The first is the most sustainable and the fairest path. This is the path of ending the drain on our city and raising taxes on the richest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations. The onus for resolving this crisis should not be placed on the backs of working and middle-class New Yorkers.
Mamdani adds the second path, if the governor does not agree to increase taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers, is an unfair choice. According to the mayor, the city would need to raise property taxes by nearly 10% to fill their budget deficit of an estimated projection ranging from $7 to $12 billion.
Faced with no other choice, the city would have to exercise the only revenue lever fully within our own control. We would have to raise property taxes.
Mamdani added they would also have to raid the city reserves. Negotiations are ongoing, but many lawmakers feel the push from Mayor Mamdani will continue and possibly achieve an agreement between the governor and the legislature.
We have a person with one of the largest platforms in America, if not the world, saying we need to tax the rich for economic justice. He's right on the issue, and this is the most there's ever been a spotlight shown on the issue in Albany.
So he's got a lot of currency here in Albany right now. And there's a real appetite for working closely with the mayor, with the city, to help us get a handle on this issue.
Some political experts say while the governor has drawn her line in the sand on this, it'll be a tough decision.
This is it's an interesting moment to see whether the governor will, in her perspective of affordability, widen that lens. Because right now she's not willing. And she sees ways of creating affordability in other areas.
While Mamdani has stressed raising property taxes is a last resort, many state lawmakers are against the strategy, including some Democrats who are supportive of increasing taxes on wealthy New Yorkers, but not the property tax option.
I think one thing that is a non-starter for us here in Albany, and particularly those supporting the city members, is a tax on property owners. So property tax is a non-starter.
Many state lawmakers who are supportive of the issue and Mamdani's momentum on it say this proposal could have a significant impact for the state.
Really important because the whole point of taxing those at the highest level is that we're investing that revenue back in social programs.
These will bring many billions of dollars of revenue into the state that would allow us to fund things like universal child care and healthcare access and backfill some of the programs that the federal government is cutting, like SNAP, like Medicaid, etc.
Some Democrats also say small increases in taxes will mean very little for wealthy New Yorkers and businesses, especially with tax cuts they've already received at the federal level.
When you make over $15 million every year and we're taxing you a teeny bit more, you're going to be okay. They're going to be all right. Working class New Yorkers can't pay their rent. They can't pay their utility bills. And that is the reality of a lot of New Yorkers. Those New Yorkers are the ones that are leaving New York every year. So those are the people that I frankly care about the most.
On the federal level, the Trump administration tax cuts in the Big Beautiful Bill signed into law last July significantly lowered tax brackets for top earners and wealthy corporations. The federal tax cuts in Trump's mega bill totaled to roughly $4.5 trillion, partially funded by cutting social services programs like Medicaid by $1 trillion. According to data from the Center on Budget Policy and Priorities, the top 1% of earners would receive federal tax cuts 3 times the size of those for people in the bottom 60%. Some Democrats say increasing taxes on the wealthy in New York would not only help more working-class New Yorkers, but it would send a clear message about actions at the federal level.
I think on the front end, it would combat the Donald Trump agenda of doing a transfer of wealth to the richest in order to make cuts to Medicaid and cuts to SNAP, pushing back against those, but also thinking even more bold and going not just defense against Donald Trump, but offense, and saying we're going to fight even harder. So sustainable funding for childcare, paying the childcare workers more, investing in more community schools and K-12 education.
The tax policy isn't just supported by Democrats, it's also widely supported by the public. According to a recent Siena poll, 54% of voters said the state should allow tax increases on the wealthy in the city alone. Over the past few years, many advocates have traveled to Albany to rally for this issue. This year alone, there have been several rallies on this issue, highlighting different areas the proposal's generated revenue could benefit, such as childcare and higher education. Advocate Harold Hines, who traveled to Albany from New York City with his wife and 2-year-old to rally for the issue, says he believes this tax proposal is the best way to generate revenue and help lower costs for New Yorkers.
It's a realistic way to make sure that this dream of having a family, of affording a family where you live is actually something that's viable.
Hines says childcare is one of their most expensive bills, paying around $1,500 a month.
And we know that especially for most people in New York City, we're on the lower end of things, so we consider ourselves lucky. But that is even a bear for us. In terms of, the impact that it has on us, it's tremendous. Aside from our mortgage and our maintenance, it is the biggest expense that we have.
Hines says he feels confident in the legislature's ability to get this tax proposal across the finish line. Some Democrats say it's their responsibility holding the majority to get proposals like this signed into law.
And there's a reason why voters have entrusted us to be able to make these financial decisions for the state budget. We know that we want to achieve universal child care. We know the way to do it is to make the ultra-wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share, which they're currently not. And so we're going to make sure that we make that a priority.
State leaders in the governor's office are currently negotiating the final budget in overtime. The final budget was due April 1st. Some legislative leaders are on the same side of the issue, wanting to increase taxes. State Senate Majority Leader Stewart-Cousins, a Democrat representing parts of Westchester, says the majority plans to push for their tax the rich proposal to end up in the final budget.
There's always going to be conversations, and I think that we are clear that we are looking to fund things that we know are important to New Yorkers.
Across the aisle, the Senate Minority Leader stresses the minority conference is completely against raising taxes.
We pay some of the highest taxes in the state, in the country. Where is it making people's lives better? I do not believe that the solution to the affordability issue, and this conference does not believe that it rests in tax increases.
On the Assembly side, Speaker Carl Heastie, a Democrat representing parts of the Bronx, says for him the issue is less about a battle between the legislative chamber and the executive chamber and more about making sure New Yorkers have what they need at the end of the day. He says the governor has expressed to him that she wants to make sure the city is on solid ground, and that's where the conversation needs to start.
So between the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor, we all seem to acknowledge that there is more of a need for help, then we have to figure out how to pay for that. So if somehow more reserves are being used or something like that. So I'm just saying that is the most important thing for us.
While it is unclear if the governor will waver on her consistent stance that she doesn't want to raise taxes, the governor says she does hear New Yorkers' concerns and frustrations about affordability.
I am focused 100% on affordability measures. Look at my budget. Putting more money back in people's pockets, trying to go after programs that are unsustainable, trying to find smarter ways to do things, and questioning the premise behind systems that have been in place for decades, making New Yorkers spend far too much money, and I'm questioning those as well. So I think if you look at the focus, we will have a responsible, fiscally sound budget.
The final conclusion will certainly be interesting. Will the governor stick to her line in the sand on this issue, or will she concede to pressure from the legislature and the Mamdani administration? Some lawmakers say they think progressive tax increases will be reflected in the final budget and that the governor could possibly come around to understanding the urgency and need for this proposal. The budget deadline has come and gone. Lawmakers are currently working in overtime. We will continue to follow this process as it unfolds. Elise Klein, New York Now.
Last year, New York's capital city made history when it elected its first Black mayor. Now, months later, Albany Mayor Dorcey Applyrs is grappling with what that milestone means, her vision for the city, and what level of state funding is needed from this year's budget. We sat down with the mayor to unpack all of this and more in this next segment. Let's take a look. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today, Mayor.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And you are the first Black leader to be elected to serve as the city of Albany's mayor. So what does that milestone mean to you, and how does it impact the way that you approach leadership?
Well, I get asked this question often, and I am still processing what this milestone means, and how I'm able to really think about it is some of the encouragement that I get or the comments that I get from the people I serve. For example, a 90-year-old neighbor who has said, I never thought that I would see this in my lifetime. Or some of the young people who say, that's Mayor Applyrs. To me, the fact that so many residents feel so inspired, so proud, so hopeful about my leadership, that helps me to put into context the weight of this moment and what it truly means. Our city is nearly 400 years old, and we have been able to do something that has never been done. And so while that is so humbling to me, extremely humbling, there's also the weight that comes with the expectation, because no one has seen a leader of this city who looks like me. And so I'm very conscious of that. But also in being conscious of that, I am authentically me. I am the same way regardless of the audience or the constituency that I meet with. My message is the same, and it is really about how collectively we move our city forward and bringing my skill set, my passion, my love to the work that I do every single day to really set the bar and tone for excellence. That's what I expect of myself and the people that serve the residents of our city. And so that is a part of how I approach my everyday showing up for the people of Albany.
And how have your experiences serving as the city's chief auditor and serving in the Common Council impacted your work today?
Well, I came to the mayor's seat ready to hit the ground running. Unlike some of the other candidates on the campaign trail, I was able to talk very clearly and plainly with Albany residents to say that, look, I know my way around City Hall. I don't need to get directions to the bathroom in City Hall. I am very familiar with the legislative branch and how that works to move our city forward. I've been an administrator in City Hall, being a steward of our city's finances and looking at our systems and processes. So those two positions equipped me with the expertise, knowledge base, and experience to literally move across the hall ready to go. It also allowed me to have a built-in constituency. I have served Albany residents for a little over 10 years. I am a outside elected official, and what I mean by that, I do not govern just in City Hall or work just in City Hall. I am someone who is boots on the ground, knocking on doors, talking to residents. That is my happy place. And so it was all of those relationships built over a decade that really helped me to get to this place. And I rely on those relationships even now as mayor, gleaming information about how to move our city forward.
When I think of Albany, I think of all the students who come to Albany to study at different colleges and universities in the city of Albany, but also around the capital region. And we know every year lawmakers, staffers, and elected officials travel to the state capitol for the legislative session. So how are you going to attempt to convince some of these people to potentially call Albany their home and invest their own personal resources in the success of the city?
Well, that work has already started. I've heard from so many people who have said, you know what, I've given Albany a second look over. I left the city and moved to fill in the blank. I don't want to throw a city under the bus. But even talking to some young professionals who have left New York altogether and have reached out and said, you know what, I would consider moving back to Albany because I am inspired by what you're doing for our city. One, I take my role as being the #1 cheerleader for our city. It is my job to be out yelling from the rooftop about how great our city is and highlighting those things that often get buried by negativity. And so I moved here as a graduate student. I attended UAlbany, so I'm a Great Dane. And this city really changed my life. I was able to meet my husband here. We're raising 2 girls here. I bought my first home here. I started my career here and was able to aspire and run for mayor. And so my story alone is a clear example of the many opportunities and possibilities that exist in the city of Albany. And so I am not afraid to tell that story, in addition to being very assertive with policies that promote, whether it is turning the lights back on or our amendments to the inclusionary zoning legislation to increase housing in our city. There's a demand for more housing. When you have more housing, we grow our population and tax base. And so my policies and practices also reflect my message about why Albany and why now.
And when it comes to state level funding, last year's state budget allocated more than $400 million to the city of Albany to help with its revitalization. I know part of that could potentially be going to public safety, but how are you going to be stewarding those funds and ensuring that they're going to the most impactful areas in the city?
Well, in particular, the $200 million that's been allocated specifically for downtown, my team and I have been in constant communication with the governor's office, ESD, those who are the stewards of those dollars, and really running point and guiding conversations around the dollars. As the mayor, I am at the table, bringing our residents and our business owners' voices to that conversation. I will say, and I just want to acknowledge the fact that the state has done a wonderful job with community input, checking the temperature of residents and business owners in Albany to say, what do you want? What should this money be used towards? And so we are now at the phase where some key themes have emerged and some priorities have been set for the direction that those monies will go into. And now that portal is open so that people can now start to apply for funding. And so myself and my team, we are committed to being good stewards to ensure that that $200 million investment in revitalizing downtown triples, and it really serves as a catalyst to jumpstart our economy in the city. And then the other aspects of those funds will be used towards things like revitalizing our state museum, and some of that funding going towards public safety.
And lastly, it is budget season again this year. Certainly at the state capitol, lawmakers and the executive chamber are negotiating the state's budget. So what level of funding are you looking for the city of Albany in the years ahead to complete your vision for the city and also potentially address the financial challenges that you're currently facing?
You know, this is the part of the segment where I say I'm not too proud to beg, and that I have definitely used my platform as mayor to go up the hill with my tin cup and to advocate to our state delegation, but also our governor and our speaker, as well as the majority leader, really talking to them about, in the state legislature, about the city's fiscal picture. And in addition, what we need to be a thriving city. So my asks are funding to support, specifically $15 million to support addressing that structural deficit that we have, to start chipping away at that, but also funding to support initiatives like our Office of Violence Prevention and our Ambassador Program to create presence on our business corridors. There have been a host of acts, but those have been the leading talking points to our state delegation and colleagues.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today, but we thank you so much for taking the time to connect with us today, Mayor.
Thank you for having me.
And we were speaking with Albany Mayor Dorcey Applyrs. And for more on the mayor's vision for the city, you can visit our website. That's at nynow.org. Well, that does it for this edition of New York Now. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next week.
Funding for New York Now is provided by WNET,